We're no longer dealing with a hacker in their mom's basement. We're dealing with multi-state organizations. Having AI make decisions quicker, but making sure there's still people in the loop. How have you seen that progression and evolution?
The professionalization of hacking, network intrusion, the marketplaces that we see out there, fraud is so human-based. No matter what the fraud looks like, there's always going to be a human element to it. It's the motivation behind the criminal act. I don't think AI is a substitute for personnel whatsoever. I don't believe it's going to eliminate the people working in risk and in fraud. The human has to be involved in there, and experience really drives that in evaluating what the accuracy of those fraud investigations would look like.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Risk and Reason podcast. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Jason Brown. He's the Director of Risk Operations at Imprint. He has a pretty fascinating background working, I want to say, close to 25 years in the U.S. Secret Service, working across cybersecurity, cybercrime, digital forensics, and has taken that experience now into the world of consumer credit, a really interesting B2B use case, and how transactions in the age of synthetic fraud and AI fraud have evolved. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Eli. Thank you for having me here today.
I guess to start off, I gave an introduction which probably does a disservice to all that you've done. Could you walk us through, what drew you to, I guess, this broader realm of, I would say, protecting people from a young age, and just please give us that story.
I went to college at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. I studied political science there. I thought I was going to run political campaigns for a living. And in my senior year, I did an internship in the then Lieutenant Governor's office, Paul Patton, who was eventually elected governor, and worked for the first 4 years of his administration as one of the staff members. That short period of time, although it was a great learning experience and I had a great time in the office, figured out I didn't want to remain in politics. I decided I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I applied for the Kentucky State Police and the U.S. Secret Service, both at the same time. The Secret Service called first, and that's where I ended up. Started off my career up in the New York field office, was assigned after only 2 weeks up there into the New York Electronic Crimes Task Force, where I spent for the entire 7 years that I was up there in New York, under the tutelage of Bobby Weaver, the one we call the grandfather of the ECTF network. What was cool about the ECTFs, Bobby really tried to teach us to act and think about the way corporations look at crimes and violations and security instances. So, we were out there, we wanted to apprehend the individual, but, we were more worried about shareholder value, learning about the corporations, making sure that we did what we could do to help them protect their networks moving forward. Through that, I was able to go into the Electronic Crime Special Agent program, like you said, doing digital forensics for a couple of years. When my time in New York was up, I still had a commitment for XAP before I could go into my protection time, so I transferred down to headquarters. Was one of the original agents in the cyber intelligence section down there. That was a unit that we formed back in the early 2000s, really to address the large-scale trafficking of access device fraud data over the internet, credit card information, for lack of a better term, and to address some of the major network intrusions that we were seeing out there. So, this was pre-PCI DSS, so we were having a lot of track data being stored on corporate computers that were being exploited and stolen and then trafficked out on the internet. Did that for several years. After a couple of years, I was assigned over to the White House in the last year of the Bush administration with the Homeland Security Council, and did that for the last year of Bush and the first 6 months of Obama, working on the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative, doing defensive cyber policy. After that, transferred back to headquarters, was one of the agents to help stand up the critical protection, the CSPI, Critical Systems Protection Initiative, and that's essentially the cyber advance that we do for all of our protectees up until this day. From there, transferred back over into protection. I was on President Obama's detail for 4 years. While I was there, specialized in counter surveillance. Was promoted off Obama's detail to go back, and I was actually for 6 months over our XAP program, the digital forensic program for the service. And after a short period there, went back and became the supervisor of the cyber intelligence section. So full circle as one of the first agents in the section, and then was able to go back and be a supervisor there for about a year. Came down to a point where in my personal life, I had a couple of boys that were getting older. My wife and I, both being from Kentucky, we wanted to get back to the South to raise them. The Knoxville resident office came open. Was fortunate enough to be transferred down here as the agent in charge in Knoxville, where I spent the last 8 years of my career. And down here, I was responsible for the 23 counties in Northeast Tennessee with everything that we had going on down here, from both criminal investigations, protective intelligence to protection. And wrapped up my career down here in July 24. Took about 6 months off to get my head straight, to recover a little bit, take a little downtime, recharge, and wanted to go into private industry. Was looking at fintech, was looking at cyber threat intelligence companies out there, and found Imprint, or should I say they found me. And was fortunate enough to interview with them, and they brought me on board, as you said, as the director of risk operations, where I serve now. And in that capacity, I'm over everything that we do operationally in the risk side.
It's an amazing story. I didn't know you studied political science. I love that.
Yep.
When you got in ECTF, I believe it came from the Patriot Act. And
actually, the ECTF predated the Patriot Act.
Okay.
And then after 9/11, the Patriot Act codified the ECTF, and it was a subsection of the Patriot Act where we had to expand the ECTF network all over the Secret Service and all of our major field offices.
Interesting. When you talk about, I guess, codifying it, I'm guessing that, we say, if people say in risk today, to jump ahead before we jump back, that we're no longer dealing with a hacker in their mom's basement. We're dealing with multi-state organizations. When you're dealing with cyber terrorism, cybercrime at the government level, you're coming at it, I imagine, with that mindset. Could you talk, though, about how you've seen in these different perches the professionalization of these battlefronts? Now, we say, it's not Bonnie and Clyde anymore going to a bank. Bad actors have moved online, and, these are still multinational criminal organizations, and there are different ways that they're going at it now. But to the degree of what you can share, how have you seen that progression and evolution?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been, as you said, the professionalization of hacking, network intrusion, the marketplaces that we see out there. Back in the early 2000s, there was a case out of our Newark office called Operation Firewall. The agent was Steve Ward, and it was after the apprehension of an individual named Albert Gonzalez, who was running one of the largest English-based carding forums out there. I worked on that.
For those who don't know,
as a
can you share what a
sidebar.
carding forum is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a website where you gain membership into it, and they regularly traffic stolen credit card information. That credit card information could come from a gas pump skimmer. It may come from a major network intrusion. It may come from a piece of malware, but we're talking about everything that you would need to either affect a credit card transaction or do a full identity takeover, whether you're just buying the track data from the credit card or you're buying what we call fulls, which include your name, your social security number, everything you can to take over a person's identity. And those marketplaces are out there plentiful. We've seen a lot of that migrate to the dark web, to the unaddressable space where you would access via Tor these days. But back in the early 2000s, it was open, well, not necessarily open, but regular web portals of web pages that were password protected, and you gained a reputation as a reliable criminal because there is honor amongst thieves, and that's how you got into those portals.
And I cut you off, and then for the professionalizations, you're talking about this operation that you did, and you caught someone who ran the largest card forum, or one of the larger ones at the time.
Yeah, I didn't personally run the investigation. I was in New York at the time, but I assisted with it whenever they eventually did a roundup, and we had some arrest over in New York. But it was an individual that was arrested for other violations, and they figured out that he was the main administrator of this carding portal. And so in that undercover operation, there's been a lot of stories out there written about it. The Secret Service essentially took over that carding portal for a span of months and was able to apprehend multiple perpetrators of that stolen credit card information that were located all over the world.
Now, when you think about an operation like this, that obviously many things have to go into doing it successfully. You need cooperation against multiple teams. You need this diligence over many months. People talk about fraud as this cat and mouse game of, fraudsters are trying to do things and risk teams are trying to respond. What did being in the government and the Secret Service really teach you about how to manage teams that have maybe diverse skill sets and getting those different teams to work together towards this type of goal?
I think it poised us in a unique position with being in the Secret Service to begin with. The Secret Service is a very small federal law enforcement agency when you look at comparatively to the FBI and some of the other ones out there. Just when you look at the protection mission that the Secret Service has, whenever we go into a city to set up a security plan for the president or the vice president when they travel in there, it's not the Secret Service doing that security plan. It's the Secret Service, it's the local police, it's the state police, it's our other federal partners. Everybody has their piece of the pie and their piece of the puzzle to make that plan happen. The same thing goes with a complex criminal investigation. My specialty at the time in the early 2000s was computer forensics. We had other individuals that specialized investigating in network intrusion investigations. You had other individuals that were network administrators that had a background in IT. You need to nobody's going to be an expert in anyone's situation. So you really have to be a force multiplier, and you cannot only just rely on that within federal law enforcement. When you get into large scale operations such as that one and any of them subsequently, you have to partner with corporate America, because corporate America is always going to be a couple of steps ahead of the government. That's just the way it is. And if you're not engaging and working with your corporate partners, then you're not going to be as effective as you could otherwise.
There's so much here. I think when you talk about the idea of kind of speed of corporate maybe versus government, definitely a hot topic when we think about speed today is artificial intelligence and how you can use AI to drive kind of effectiveness, to drive precision. At the same side, there can be hallucinations, as we know. And AI isn't always about it telling you where it has hallucinated. We're dealing with an area here where if you get something wrong, if you were wrong and this person actually is on a sanctions list, and now the bank is able to, is now running afoul of the Patriot Act, they could get in a lot of trouble. How do you think about that balance of, having AI make decisions quicker, but making sure there's still people in the loop? Do you think that a human should always be approving from a QA perspective? What do you think that balance should look like?
This is something we're going through right now in Imprint, and I'm sure a lot of corporations are. How do you most effectively bring AI in? I don't think AI is a substitute for personnel whatsoever. I don't believe it's going to eliminate the people working in risk and in fraud. I think it is a force multiplier. It makes us more efficient. It makes us better at what we're doing and where we can do it quicker. But there are some things that we can't automate. If you train that LLM well enough, can it follow your standard operating procedure? Can it analyze the evidence, the data itself, and make an educated decision in a way that both you, or like with us with Imprint, we had to look to our sponsoring banks as well, making sure they're comfortable with those decisions. We don't have that in the workflow as of yet, but that's always something that we want to explore, is how do we properly deploy AI? How do we ensure that there aren't hallucinations? And I think, Eli, you're right on the target there, that I do think that the human is always going to be involved with that, not only to make sure that it is coming through and it's doing everything accurately, but on top of that, something that I shared with you earlier before we did the talk is, I think fraud is so human-based. No matter what the fraud looks like, there's always going to be a human element to it. It's the motivation behind the criminal act. It's the motivation behind why they are doing what and where in the steps of the intrusion or the steps of the violation. Are they utilizing AI and other pieces of technology because they're lazy? Are they doing it because they don't have the knowledge, the old script kiddies that we always used to see with malware production? Or is it just making them more efficient on there? That's hard for a computer always to figure out. And I think the human has to be involved in there, and experience really drives that in evaluating what the accuracy of those fraud investigations would look like.
Yeah, you shared with me in advance a line that I love, which is fraud is fundamentally human. And I think this is really interesting when you think about AI, and I like, and you did as well, to bucket synthetic fraud in here, in that when you think about what synthetic fraud is, it's creating identities, nurturing them into a bureau that shouldn't exist. AI makes it easier to create combinations of this, and Gen AI makes it easier to create more fake identities. So AI and synthetic are increasing the amount of overall identities we have to sift through. When you say fraud is fundamentally human, I'm guessing that you're kind of saying to the fact that at some point a human must do something to take advantage of these identities. The fraud technically isn't necessarily happening at the moment of application, is what you're doing with it. How do you think about that? How do you think about kind of deriving the intent? Or do you even kind of, do you think it even starts a step sooner?
I think more than anything is I'm looking for the motivation of what's happening. Why is the person doing what they're doing on the platform? Are they trying to gain access to the platform to steal information? Are they trying to gain access to the platform to exploit stolen information they already have? Do they have a bunch of stolen account numbers that they're looking to engage in money laundering, to wash money in one way or another through a transaction? I think the human is always part of that because fundamentally people are greedy and people are lazy. And to what extent? That's what dictates where they fall in the fraud line, is how greedy are they, how lazy are they, and how determined are they to try to exploit your network and exploit your platform.
And do you think, when you're kind of talking about, I like to say in that we work in many different verticals. And I say on the one hand, fraud is fraud, in that the tool you use to catch synthetic fraud for a real estate company is probably the same tool you're using to catch it for a credit company. However, I say fraud is not fraud, in that the real estate company is worried about eviction rates going up, and the credit lending company is worried about chargebacks and disputes. So these are worried about fundamentally different motivations. When you talk about this and figure out the motivation, do you think that changes from your perspective? One, I guess, do you think fraudsters operate in multiple kind of vectors? Like are fraudsters a diversified horizontal suite, if you will, where they're kind of trying to use the same tools to get access? Or do you think that kind of you've seen maybe a develop of specializations where there are different kind of fraudsters or ranks that had developed specialties at romance scams or developed specialties at defrauding certain types of companies?
I think overall we see a great specialization, especially if you look back at the marketplaces we discussed earlier. If you go in there, you could shop around for exact skill set you need. Did you need somebody that was a malware writer? Did you need somebody that was able to deploy the malware and collect the information from you? Did you need to go in and purchase large-scale access devices so you can go out and exploit them? Did you need somebody to produce fake identification documents for you? All those specialties are out there and available. And the individuals in the criminal, the overall marketplace, they serve different functions. If you're really good at running a set of mules would be people that if you have a bunch of credit card numbers with associated PINs, debit cards, and you encode them to white plastic. In previous years, you used to mail those pieces of white plastic out with the ATM numbers, and you would have people go out and actually go to the ATMs and do cash outs. We still see that from time to time. We've seen lately a lot more of ghost tapping, where they will preload several credit card numbers into virtual wallets via Google Wallet or Apple or things of that nature, and encode those on phones and actually ship the phones out so the phones can do the transactions at the point of sale right from the phone. There's a lot of specialization in there, and it's just what is your motivation and what do you need? What piece of that do you need to complete your fraud?
You brought up Mule accounts. There's this interesting study, I think, that I could be slightly off on it. Texas is the state with the number one remittances via bank to Mexico, which makes sense. It's on the border. Mm-hmm. And I believe 1 year Minnesota was 2, which people thought was very suspicious, in that this seems like these are perhaps accounts being leveraged to send money with less of a connection. And I want to throw this to you for 2 reasons. One is, I think Mule accounts are on the rise because fraudsters realize that they may not be able to open accounts anymore, so can they get people to do their dirty business? But 2, to me, this goes back to, I think, an important area that when we talk about fighting fraud, we're fighting, like that example is highlighting how cartels bring in money to then do the kind of crime and traffic substances. And I think maybe, I'm curious, do you like kind of bring a sense of like, and I mean this in the most sincere way, kind of real pride of what you are working on in the Secret Service? Those organizations aren't discriminating if they're targeting government or private companies, but they're using the proceeds all the same. And I feel that maybe we don't spend as much time talking about what does it mean to catch a bad actor? Who are those bad actors and what would they actually be doing? So I know that was a lot, but I'm curious, from Mule accounts to cartels.
Well, I think we're unique when we're talking about the Secret Service. When we were formed, we were part of the Treasury Department originally. And then after the Patriot Act, we became part of the Department of Homeland Security. We have always been a white-collar financial fraud investigation agency. And that's why we are always interested in protecting the payment networks of the U.S. corporate systems. So that's why we are always involved with access device fraud from the beginning. And what differentiates us from other law enforcement entities is just that, is we're looking forward in fraud. We changed the vernacular that we used for access device fraud and other crimes that the Secret Service investigated several years ago to say that we were investigating cyber-enabled fraud. So that would be any type of fraud where some type of cyber is involved with it. Are you using crypto to move the money? Are you trafficking in the credit card numbers? Are you exploiting those credit card numbers over the internet? Are you re-encoding white plastic and doing it at ATMs? Are you going in and doing point of sales? We look at it more in the financial fraud side of it. Now, you brought up cartels and things of that nature. There's also what we could look at when we're talking about especially network intrusions. Are we talking about nation state and things of that nature? The Secret Service overall, we don't have any Title 50 authorities, so we are not an intelligence agency as the way FBI is when they're dual hat. So when it came to nation state type of investigations, we would not actively engage in those. But with the Secret Service, we were always looking for that financially motivated criminal looking to exploit the financial services networks.
It's really interesting. When you think about kind of looking to exploit financial networks, will you be going preemptively to a payment rail or some type of method and saying, we think this is an exploitation that you should be worried about? And part two of that is, how do you feel about now with whether it's stablecoins, agentic commerce, or there are newer methods that are being introduced, and regulations definitely lagging behind. Protocols are lagging behind. I still haven't really seen much with agentic commerce.
Yeah.
But how do you, and I'm not sure when we will, but that's not for me to raise money on, so I'll let them figure it out. But when you think about these new methods, how do you think about kind of like, what should the role be of government or agencies to make sure that these are actually built in a way that the protocols aren't able to be exploited?
That's a tough question, because I would often say that a lot of those exploitations that are out there to exploit the payment rails that we don't know they're out there, I don't think it's going to be the government that identifies them. I don't necessarily think it's always going to be the criminal element that identifies them. I think it's going to be corporate America as we're going through and we're looking to implement these new methods. I am absolutely fascinated by stablecoins right now. I'll talk those upside, one side up and the other. I think that is the next step of what we're seeing in payment systems, especially for cross-border payments. And AI is going to be involved, especially what you said with agentic commerce. And we just saw, the disagreement that we've got going on right now with ChatGPT and with Amazon. Are those agentic merchants going to be able to operate on Amazon? Or is Amazon rightfully classifying them as a bad actor because it does have the same indications of somebody looking to exploit their platform? A lot of these problems, you can't look to government for that. And that's why it's particularly interesting for me, for being out of government now and being in private industry and being in a startup. Imprint's been around for a little over 5 years now, so we're still a small pre-public company. And it's fun because we are moving at the speed of light. As soon as we can figure something out, we're moving along. The same thing with you guys, Eli, with Footprint. You guys are doing the exact same thing. I think a lot of what we're going to see for the agent of change is going to come from small, young, nimble companies like ours that are addressing the issues in the space as they're seeing them in real time, because we're not hamstrung by the old brick and mortar financial services processes that some of our larger corporate partners are involved with.
Think about, I guess, the future of the space. What gives you hope? Like, what have you kind of discovered that has really given, without, letting people know what they can't do to get past you anymore, but what broadly do you think kind of is giving you hope that kind of there are more and more tools for people like you in the seat of fighting these threats?
I think by enabling some of the more innovative ways of making payments out there, it's going to make it more secure. I think blockchain is a great thing. Blockchain is highly traceable. You can utilize some really good tools to figure out who's doing what. Once it hits the blockchain, it's in there. You just have to learn how to utilize it. Stablecoins fall right into that. I think by utilizing crypto, back in the past when we were talking about it in the early 2000s, we were talking about web money and e-gold and some of these old online currencies that work just because we agreed they work. Now that we're seeing crypto, the blockchain, based off the blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, everything we're seeing with stablecoins, USDC versus USDT, with the Genius Act being passed this year, seeing that coming back into shore, where we were seeing a lot of things with stablecoins going offshore in the past couple of years because maybe we weren't as forgiving for those new technologies with the U.S., but we're seeing more of it going on now. I guess just a long-winded way of saying there's so much that is changing and has changed quickly in the last couple of weeks to months in the crypto space that I believe that what was largely seen as foreign just months ago that nobody understands when we say stablecoin, it's just some fad, that we're actually seeing it be endorsed by U.S. government entities, by major corporations like JP Morgan Chase. And then you have the preeminence of a lot of what we're going on with the fintechs, with Coinbase and others, Fireblocks, all those type of companies that are just really making these technologies mainstream.
Could you maybe touch on the traceability aspect? Why is that so tough traditionally?
Mainly because it's an education gap. People need to learn how to utilize the tools. The blockchain is there. I'm not the most well trained on it. I have experience in it, but we always utilize people that have more experience that were doing it, that to assist us in law enforcement to do those, to utilize those tools on the blockchain to look at them. But the capability is there. The technology is there. You just have to learn how to utilize it properly. And like I said, I'm not the best one to speak to that right now.
A final fun question for me. You may or may not be able to answer it. Did you ever get to ride in the Beast?
I never rode in the Beast because I was never in the transportation section. I was in the follow-up vehicle, the very large Suburban that followed it quite often. But no, never on the Beast. Was on Air Force One, was never on Marine One. But there were some unique experiences there.
I'm sure. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you coming and sharing these stories and all you've learned, and appreciate all the work you do.
I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to running into you again sometime soon.
Likewise, sir.